Post and Courier virtual Pints and Politics. We've been here for about an hour. First we met Kathy Landing, then we met Nancy Mace. Now we're going to meet Brad Mole. Chris Cox, the fourth candidate for the District 1 seat in the GOP primary, turned down our invitation tonight. In case you're just now joining us, to my right is political editor Skylar Croft and political reporter Caitlin Bird. They're interviewing Brad. I'm going to pause for one more second before I get off the stage and thank our sponsor, AARP South Carolina. They are generously sponsoring Pints and Politics for all of 2020. And I also want to thank Palmetto Brewery, where we are today. They have welcomed us into their venue so many times over the last year as we have developed Pints and Politics. Thank you for joining us tonight.
I get to do the intro this time. We're going to give Skylar a break on the last one.
Oh, good.
So, Brad Mole, you're the Housing and Neighborhood Services Administrator for the town of Bluffton, where you help people get home repairs and find affordable housing. Born and raised in Hampton County, Brad is the son of a preacher. He remembers his father answering late-night phone calls when community members experienced loss or were going through difficult times. In October, he became the last Republican to jump into the high-stakes congressional race here in the 1st District, and he may be the only candidate in the contest who openly talks about voting for Barack Obama and later voting for Donald Trump. I see why it's so tricky, Skylar, turning the pages. After participating in Senator Tim Scott's Empower America project, he decided to throw his hat into the ring in this race. On the trail, he frequently says he is the candidate who has heart in the race. He is 43, a father of 4, and his wife served in the Navy. He supports and respects President Trump, and he's here to take our questions tonight.
Thank you.
Start off with something very easy and simple.
Oh, good.
How did the son of a preacher get into politics?
Well, I've been asked that question before, and my answer has always been, I've always pretty much been involved in politics as a preacher's kid. Of course, growing up here in the Low Country and growing up in a small town period, you end up being around, I would say, more local politics than anything. So you end up going to church with the mayor and or some city town councilman, and that's the same kind of, in my situation, we've church my dad pastored at, the mayor and town council people went there, so I've helped them doing their campaigns, or went to town council meetings, and so I kind of grew up around local politics.
Who are some of the politicians that you crossed paths with and remember talking to, or was there someone during that period that stirred you in the direction of politics particularly?
No, he was a Democrat.
Yeah.
But he was also, I would say, which I believe on both sides of the aisle, they're good people. And this was he was a state representative for the state of South Carolina, for Allendale County area, Wilbur Cave. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I like about him, just growing up, being 10, 11 years old, I saw the way he saw a different, that was kind of my first time of seeing a different side of how you can really help someone in their life outside of a food bank and church, and but help them out through serving them as their elected leader. And I saw that, and he kind of walked it out well in the sense of how he carried himself with integrity. Mm-hmm.
So how is working in housing an asset to you in this race, and how do you get Republicans to listen to you and talk about housing and make it a kitchen table issue for them as opposed to ceding it to the Democrats?
So yeah, I mean, I think with me working in housing and just, my position was housing neighborhood services, it gave me, and when I said last night, I think, one of the things I spent my time doing over the last year and a half, 2 years, was I spent too much time with the people and not enough time getting to know people in D.C. And so I think that position helped me, again, to be able to understand the daily lives of the individuals here in this district. It gave me insight into where they are now and insight into where they would like to go, meaning that they're single parents that have come to me saying, "Brad, listen, I'm working here now, I'm working 40 hours a week, but I like photography, or I like this, and I want to see how can I start a business, photography business, or whatever else, restaurant business." And it was me kind of walking them through those steps of getting a business license, putting them in touch with school representatives in the area. So yeah, just to answer that part of your question. And then the other part you kind of mentioned as far as how do I get Republicans to talk about. I mean, I think, I know Ben Carson being the head of HUD now, and with me being the chairman of the Low Country Affordable Housing Coalition, I've kind of worked with some HUD officials throughout the years. But they've already talking about it. I mean, the president created the council last year, the White House Council on Affordable Housing and how to remove regulatory barriers that sometimes keep affordable housing and workforce housing from happening. Some of those unneeded regulations that are in place that needs to be taken a look at on a federal level, state level, and local level. So I think they're already having that conversation. It's just, again, having it in the way of removing regulations versus pushing money towards.
Are there specific regulations that you find are burdensome to people in the first district specifically?
I mean, one of the areas that I, just looking at the council and reading some of their goals and some of the things that I've come across as far as being in the growth management department, working with the town of Bluffton, is, sometimes I wish that we would look more on a local level at maybe density. I mean, I know city of Charleston and Charleston County and the surrounding municipalities kind of always, is talking about how high can you build and how much can you build on a particular piece of property. So density, I would say, is one. Zoning, how do we zone? Some areas considered industrial of the town and some considered residential. How do you balance those things? So best practices, I think, as we take a look at best practices throughout the country as far as how they're handling their growth and workforce housing, those are some areas that I think that we should take a look at.
Well, given the recent pace and where we are with the coronavirus pandemic, what would you do differently if you were in Congress than what's been done so far to either react or to head off something like this happening again?
I would say as much as possible, because of course you have the coronavirus commission that's out now that put out some recommendations. A lot of those recommendations I agree with as far as keeping a future pandemic happening to the level as it is now, or as it has been with COVID-19. Again, some of those recommendations that I agree with, as far as, maybe the local municipalities or state, even state government, to maybe put more money aside to be able to help businesses out in case of something like this breaks out again. So local government putting money aside. I know local, state government kind of sometimes doing budget crunch, in budget time feel like they don't have money to put aside. But I still think that as the normal family, and also as a normal family, try to put money aside and save, I think there's opportunities for the state and local governments to save money for future issues such as this. Again, I believe also that what's even more important is that connection. Some of the things I've heard along the campaign trail, and one of the reasons I entered this race is sometimes people, your normal resident in the district or Low Country, feel like DC is a faraway fairy tale land, and they don't know how in the world that connects. The way the government operates on a federal level affects their daily lives. So I say that to say this is, I think from a moving forward, as much as possible, to make sure that we make those connections from a federal, state level to a local level, to make sure that those relationships are intact and in place in case information through the payment protection program, for example, that information needed to be pushed out, but making sure those channels are already in place next time around, that they can be pushed out a lot easier, and make sure it makes it to the last person and to the smallest business in the community, to the mom and pop shops who may not, to the older lady and husband who may be running the store, may not be too big on internet access and stuff like that. How do they get their information? So I think just the connectivity and the relationship building. Of course, I do know that one of the other recommendations, of course, that went out is to how public education going forward. This time around, I know we've seen the pictures out there of people at the beach, young kids at the beach, and and the back and forth that they shouldn't be out there, this and that. But just having that conversation of public education to say, why do we put these things in place during a public health crisis? Educating, maybe from a college level, a high school level, as far as health education classes, and how do we handle pandemics? How do we handle public health outbreaks? And how can you help? Especially when it comes to, again, with right now, because of workforce housing, affordable housing, people's trying to live in the district, we've come to the point to where we have a growing number of multi-generational homes, to where your grandma's moved in, or your parents, dad or mom or whatever. So especially in a situation like this, I've known some young gentlemen, in their 20s, like, Brad, I can't go out, or I can't come around. Well, it's not like the other guy that lives in an apartment with two other guys, but he actually lives in a home to where his grandmother lived there. He doesn't want to put her in jeopardy, so it affects him. It affects his lifestyle as well. So I think that public education component is big going forward.
And we're going to turn to our AARP South Carolina question of the day. And they ask and want to know for their members, the out-of-pocket cost for prescription drugs for older South Carolina residents continues to rise. What is your plan to reduce the cost of prescription drugs?
Again, so with reducing the cost of prescription drugs, or just even having the access to, for the normal person who said, how can I get my drugs at a cheaper price, I think is important even more, going back to, because again, my professional career has dealt a lot with elderly, low income, those who may not have access to cars and may not have access to the internet or some of the technology that we use in order to find the best drug prices. So I would like to, as much as possible, make sure that even if it's from a level of a elderly lady seeing her doctor, and he or the office being able to explain the best places to get their medicine for the best price. But many times, you go to the doctor and you just go to the first, they ask you what's your pharmacist, and you say, well, you give them your normal pharmacist you go to, but that may not be the best place to go to get for that particular drug to get the best price. And I experienced that myself, recently trying to go into the pharmacist I usually go to, and it was like almost $200 for a bottle of pills. And then I called Walmart, and they said, well, no, it would be like $5. And so just shopping around, that cost comparison, I think, would be important, making sure that cost comparison is available to the most technology savvy person, or to the elderly lady that needs to find the best price for her prescription drugs. The other thing is with the FDA. I know that the FDA is there to make sure that our drugs are safe coming in, but I would like to see more. And I know there's been some discussion as far as making sure that we're make more generic drugs available, and make them more available quicker. Will help reduce the.
But in terms of specific action that you would take in Congress, I mean, you can't legislate a bill that tells people to shop smarter. So what specifically would you want to do to address that price discrepancy and bring those costs down collectively without necessarily interfering with free market? It's challenging, but give me a specific. Yeah, specific.
Yeah, so I would work with. I'll put forth legislation bill to. For transparency as much as possible, to make sure that those costs, even before it make it to the lady I've been talking to whatever, make sure. So I would put forth legislation or a bill to make sure transparency. I know that's huge, but I think there's always opportunity for transparency in the drug industry, as well as in our federal government.
Fair enough.
We received a lot of questions and input from readers, viewers, subscribers. One of them that we came up with was South Carolina recently did away with some of the hurdles or requirements to vote absentee in the state. Charleston County itself is going to be approaching 25 to 30,000 people voting early absentee or by mail. Do you support going forward that the country adopting voting by mail from here on out, given the ease and how well it's been embraced by both Republicans and Democrats?
I personally don't. And again, with this being a new area for many of us, having that discussion, of course, I do know that there's a few states that operate on mail-in ballots. But again, just some of the conversations I've heard and research I've done put in question whether or not that should be something we would move forward with as far as mail-in ballots. Again, at this point, I wouldn't. Just because of the potential for harvesting and with the collection of ballots and the fraud that could take place, but I would.
That's overstated, though. Fraud is really just not really worked itself into the system all that much. And I know that's a comment coming out of the White House, but that really is not a dominant problem. What other reasons would you see not adopting that? Just of what you heard from other leaders or such, or?
Yeah, so I mean, my reasons for not adopting a mail-in ballot it just gives. I think, I mean, me personally, I just think it just gives opportunity for. I mean, not speaking on because I've heard it as a talking point, but because I think it just gives opportunity for fraud. I mean, there's still as far as voter list out there. There's still a voter list out there for people who are dead. But I think it's just a opportunity for fraud.
Well, based on that logic, would you reject any absentee ballots you pick up on June 9th?
No, I mean, no. I mean, but I mean, I'm assuming you were talking about maybe after going forward towards the general election. But yeah, I mean, as far as the absentee ballot system that's set up now, I mean, I agree with it. But as far as a full mailing in, ballots for the presidential or for the election in June. I mean, general election. Yeah.
We're going to move on to our 90-second question. It's become something of a signature question for us. So we enjoy doing it. And what the 90-second question is, Brad, is we ask every candidate who gets in the hot seat to tell us, in your first 100 days, what would you prioritize? What would you want to accomplish? Are there specific committees that you'd like to be involved with? But just to get you thinking about that. So just tell us what your vision is for the first 100 days is in 90 seconds. I'll hold up this timer here so you can see it. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
So my first 100 days, I would like to make sure, one of the first things I want to do my first day out there, I've had a gentleman, a current congressman from North Carolina, reached out to me. He said, Brad, listen, you get elected, get in touch with me and a few other people that's in Congress. We got a Bible study, we got a prayer group. Make sure that we get you connected because accountability to me is one of the most important things I think that a congressman can have, is to be held accountable, but to also hold accountable. What I would also like to do is to, the issue now is China, and we're receiving our medical supplies or even prescription drugs from them. I would, as much as possible, like to help push Israel. I do know that Senator Cruz is, along with some other elected officials, pushing forward a bipartisan bill to make sure that we pull ourselves away from China in so many ways, but including also with medical supplies and prescription drugs. So I would like, as much as possible, to push to make sure that we start connecting with other countries who are actually allies of ours. Second thing, I would like to also start working on cutting some spending. I mean, looking over the last year in this campaign of the many areas to where we can cut expenses. For example, with the Government Accountability Office, with improper payments, that can be cut as well. So
that's time. 90 seconds goes by super fast.
So, thank you.
Actually, our time here is going super fast.
Again?
So we are bumping up against it now. So what I'd like to do is, again, thank everyone for listening, watching, and to follow Palmetto Politics and Pints and Politics on the Post and Courier website. Our Palmetto Politics newsletter is out every morning at 8:30, fresh to your in-basket. It's all the news that happened in the state and nationally in one offering. So what I'd like to do is ask you one question, and then we're going to go right into our lightning round, which is quick answers. What is your pitch to Republicans who voted for Joe Cunningham in 2018?
choose the right person, choose the right candidate. To be honest with you, is having that conversation with them, is having the right candidate in place that can actually connect with them, show them reasons why they should come back on this side and vote for a Republican again. I actually have a well-known businessman who's got businesses throughout this district that I sat and talked with last week. He was a Joe Cunningham supporter. I went in his office and talked to him. He said, Brad, after talking to you for about 5 minutes, he said, man, I love your character. I love who you are. I believe that you're really an honest person that really has his district at heart. And he said, I'm voting for you, man. He said, I asked him if I could put a sign out. he said, so he said, well, Brad, I can't put a sign out because I did vote for Joe last time. He said, but I am voting for you, man. He said, I'm here to support you in any other way that I can. So it's just having that conversation with those people who may have voted for Joe Cunningham as Republican, who are Republicans, to say, listen, there's a good reason to come back on the other side. If we don't give them a good reason and a good candidate for them to cross back over and vote Republican this time around, they won't do it. They'll just vote for Joe again.
All right, lightning round time. All right, so these are quick and snappy. Who is your Democratic and Republican hero?
Republican hero, I mean, living, dead.
Any.
Either one, okay.
Take your pick.
I mean, again, I would say Tim Scott. I mean, he is a gentleman I look up to. And as far as Democrat, I would say, what's the young lady, I think it's Crystal or whatever, a Democrat out from Arizona. She stood up during the presidential address whenever whenever Tim Scott was being recognized by President Trump for opportunity zones. I admire her because I saw she stand up between, I think it was Kamala Harris on the one side of her sitting down and another Democrat on the other side sitting down, arms folded, wouldn't clap. Everyone else was clapping. She stood up between them and clapped for Tim Scott. And I think that says a lot about her and someone that I would want to be in Congress, which is someone that's willing to stand up, even if it's against my party, to say, hey, listen, if there's an achievement that's good, then I'm there to clap my hands for you.
What's the last book you read outside of a religious text?
Man, you throwing my phone aside, everything. You just it's got to be a real paperback book.
I'll give you an e-reader. It could be an e-reader, Brad.
Oh man, I got kids, so I mean that book was probably it was the book was probably I would say Little Miss Sunshine.
There you go.
Maybe about 10 pages long. That'll
that
work.
might be the perfect length right now with a busy campaign season.
Yes. Yep.
Great. And then this is our final question for you, Brad. If you do not win the GOP nomination, do you pledge to support the Republican nominee in this contest?
I do. Now, and that's not saying, again, I know the whole conversation, I think, are one of the biggest conversations right now that few people are having and that I've seen in this campaign is make sure everybody get behind the candidate who wins in June, and so we'll win in November. Mm-hmm. But one of the things I heard Rush Limbaugh say a couple of days ago, if you got the right candidate in place that can draw a large voter turnout, all those people who may or may not vote for someone or get behind the candidate doesn't matter because that person involved, whoever's going to stay home or whatever else. If you got the right candidate in place, those little issues like that won't matter. I mean, I had a Kathy Landy supporter. I turned around my car. I saw the sign in his yard along with Trump signs and stuff at his house. I actually thought it was a Republican house to where they actually were, to where it was actually a campaign house, but it wasn't. It was somebody's personal house. He just loved Trump that much, but he had a Kathy Landy sign. I turned around and talked to him, and he said, "Well, Brad," he said, "listen, by the time you finished talking to him, he said, Brad, I ain't quite sold yet." He said, but. And he's been emailing me lately, but he said, Brad, he said, if I don't vote for Kathy, he said, if Nancy get it, I may not vote for Nancy. So you got those people who, myself, I would definitely support the person who wins on June 9th. But again, we can't depend or put all of our eggs in the basket to say that we're going to push everybody to try to get behind this candidate. Again, if you got the candidate that's going to hold the base and reach across the aisle and pull in independents and everyone else, young families, then all of that doesn't matter, having the right candidate in place. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much,
Appreciate
Brad.
you taking part.
Thank you.